Welcome, listeners, to the Everlasting Stories podcast, presented by Semper, Serpent Books in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, Michael Strand. And tonight, I am proud to present to you the fifth entry in the News from Crate series, Housewarming by Nathaniel Hicklin. In the previous episode, Wilma Dunn and her friends, Imogen Billet and Dot Vander, investigated the question, where does the trash go? In the town of Crate, you see, there are no trash people or trash trucks, and there's no dump. When you throw something away, it simply disappears, and no one asks why. Well, Wilma wanted to know why, so she employed the help of Augustus Dorschmeyer, who is a grizzled old animal control specialist, let's call him. And he lent them the use of a cyborg ferret, who allowed them to map out the mysterious mechanical complex beneath the town of Crate. Now, in this entry, we're going to delve into Wilma's basement for ourselves and find out what is really lurking down there. As always, the Everlasting Stories podcast is brought to you by our subscribers on patreon.com/sicksemperserpent. They have access to the entire archive of written stories for just $1 a month. And for $3 a month, they get early access to new episodes of this podcast weeks before anyone else. By signing up with Sick Semper Serpent at patreon.com, you are directly supporting independent Minnesota artists to do what they love, make great stories. So, I would just like to say thank you so very much. If you like this podcast, I encourage you to share it on social media with your friends. Chances are they'll like it too. And it would be flippin' sweet if you went over to wherever you listen to this podcast and leave a review. Maybe drop a few stars on us. 5 is a good number, but you get to decide. At any rate, we're trying to build and promote this podcast because, well, it's pretty good, I think. Okay, I just want to let you know that next week will be the final entry for the News from Crate. For now, it will be back soon. And if you want to read more stories, they're up on patreon.com/sicksemperserpent. But for now, we're going to be moving on to a new series very soon. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we have tonight's story, Housewarming, Part 5 in the News from Crate by Nathaniel Hicklin. And it begins, well, right now. Wilma and Imogen didn't start exploring Wilma's basement immediately. If they were going to delve into a dark and labyrinthian tangle of walkways, hallways, and ductwork, they were going to do it right. Besides, they would have broken Dot's heart if they went without her. The next day, Imogen went back to work, and Wilma started shopping for supplies. Dot was spending more and more time at the tailor's shop with Chester. She spent her days keeping busy, doing odd jobs for various other shopkeepers in the area, too. When Wilma arrived to tell her what they had discovered under the town, Dot immediately went to Chester to arrange for an explorer's outfit. As Wilma and Dot prepared their gathered equipment in Wilma's living room, Imogen rushed through the front door. "I got here as fast as I could after work," said Imogen. "You didn't get started with Oh, I see you two have had a busy day." Wilma sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, twisting a big pile of steel-reinforced rope into a coil and weaving it through the clip mounts on her waistcoat. Dot had her phone out, fiddling with some settings. Dot's new outfit had the same basic look of white space-aged armor as her other one, but it had more angular contours and far fewer sparkly highlights. It did look better suited for physical activity, though, because the parts covering Dot's upper arms, lower legs, and midsection were covered with opaque polymer, netted inside of rigid jointed plates, and it had lots of places to clip line, like Wilma's clothes did. She also held something like a large handkerchief, populated with a variety of tiny lights and gadgets that seemed like she was supposed to wear it somewhere. "Yeah, we've been super busy," said Dot. "We wanted to be prepared for whatever we might find down there. Wilma told me about the thing that Gus did with the ferret, so I'm rigging up something similar. It'll help us make a map of whatever is downstairs as we go, and I'm trying to figure out how to run the whole thing through my phone so you can monitor our progress from up here. And I'm rigging a line so that we don't get lost," said Wilma. "One end wraps around a load-bearing pillar up here, and the other clips to me. Once I've threaded it through the loop on the back of Dot's vest, we can both go together in tandem." "Okay. Yeah, I was wondering who was going to bring up what Dot's wearing," said Imogen, turning toward Dot. "You've been here a week or two, and already you've got a second new outfit?" "Well, yeah," said Dot. "I mean, I didn't want to get my other one scuffed up. Besides, this one's more practical for exploring secret underground facilities. Ooh. Here, check it out." Dot finished configuring her phone and slid it into a dock on her back between her shoulder blades. She then reached back and pressed in the dock until it lay flush with the back of her vest, where it closed with a click. It made her look like a character from the movie Tron. Finally, she draped the fabric with all the gadgets over her head and attached it to the neckline of her outfit. Imogen realized that it was a detachable hood. "There," she said, "all ready to spelunk. You should be able to connect to my phone on the TV over Wi-Fi." Imogen turned on the TV and selected Dot's phone on the list of available devices. Immediately, 3 new images appeared on the screen. One showed Dot's face from what must have been a camera hung just in front of her left eye. One showed the room from Dot's point of view. The third was a partial 3D render of the shape of the room. As Dot turned in a circle, the point of view image turned to match, and the render began to fill in until a fully accurate model of Wilma's living room appeared on the screen. "There you go," said Dot, as the TV speaker projected her voice from the other side of the room. "We can keep eyes and ears on each other, and you can see the layout of the facility and our path through it. It should be just like what Gus used, only without the cybernetic ferret." "This is pretty impressive," said Imogen. "And you all got this together in one day? How did you know how to rig all this?" "Oh, I have all sorts of hobbies," said Dot. "She really does," said Wilma. "And the lady at the hardware store was super helpful," said Dot. "I didn't expect to find so many different kinds of LiDAR transceivers available." "I'm kind of surprised you found that stuff at all," said Wilma. "Oh, Tina's great," said Imogen. "She's super helpful for all the electronics hobbyists in town." "Yeah, I think I owe her a big favor after today," said Dot. "What about you, Wilma?" said Imogen. "You didn't get yourself a whole new wardrobe, did you?" "No, my work clothes should be fine," said Wilma, slipping her phone into her front vest pocket and folding it forward so the screen was visible. "Plus, I like my peripheral vision just fine, thank you." "All right, Imogen, I'm live. See if you can connect me." Imogen checked the list of wireless devices on the television once again, and she selected Wilma's phone. An image of her face and a view of what she was facing joined the other images on the large screen. Plus, a view of Imogen appeared on Wilma's phone. "All set," said Imogen. "So you're going down right now?" "No time like the present," said Wilma, clipping herself and Dot into the cable and holstering her multi-tool. You want to watch from here? Far more than I want to join you, said Imogen. And you definitely need someone up here to keep an eye on everything. So yes, I'm in. Just be careful, okay? Hey, of course, said Wilma, taking Imogen's hand. We'll be able to see and hear each other the whole time, and we're not going to go more than, maybe 100 meters from this room. We won't be able to get anywhere near that waste management plant we found, but we should be able to make an early scouting. It'll be fine. Okay, good, said Imogen. She looked up at Wilma and smiled. Well, let's find out what's under your house. Yeah, said Dot. It's time to take a break from theories and math homework and go exploring. She ran for the door that led below Wilma's house, and Wilma followed behind her, 100-meter cable in tow. The two descended a couple dozen straight steps, and then the staircase started to bend around into a spiral. Their footsteps echoed into the eerie darkness. Wilma and Dot stopped and looked down the middle of the shaft into the dark abyss below. Dot tapped excitedly on the handrail, her smile lighting up the dark place. Wilma didn't smile. She set her jaw. All right, said Wilma. Let's go. As they descended, the pair found doors lining the spiral staircase at regular intervals, pointing in all directions. Wilma and Dot opened them all, starting with the first one they found and proceeding down. Each one revealed a long corridor behind it. Every surface within the hallway seemed to be made of some sort of metal, coated in tiny ridges, like the grain of a tree or the bands in Damascus steel. Each corridor they discovered had yet more doors spaced several yards apart along its length, made of the same metal and set into the wall like bulkheads in a ship, but every door opened into a dark, empty room. They followed each corridor, opening doors until their tether cable ran out, and then they doubled back to the stairs and continued their descent to the next door with another strange corridor. What time is it? Said Dot after a long time. Wilma looked down at her phone. Its battery was still going strong, even though the light had been shining in front of her for hours. Almost 11 p.m. Oh, man, said Dot. I could do this for hours still. I'm so buzzed right now, I couldn't possibly sleep. The front edge of her hood was lined with tiny blue lights. Altogether, they lit the space in front of her almost as well as the light on Wilma's phone, but they were far more stylish. You're buzzed, said Wilma. So far we haven't found anything but doors and corridors. They continued their descent, patient and methodical. That's what Wilma called it anyway. Dot would have preferred something more thrilling and risky, but she allowed Wilma to lead the way on strategy. It was her house, after all, and besides, Dot was having the time of her life. She had to admit that Wilma was right, though. Every door they found leading away from the spiral staircase opened into another identical metal corridor, and none of them led to anything but empty rooms. They heard no weird moaning or creepy dripping noises just out of view like Dot had been hoping for. It didn't even smell interesting. There was no musky or oily odor in the air like one might expect from a place made of metal. It was, in absolutely every way, completely empty. Well, I'm not that buzzed, said Imogen's voice over their respective phone displays. Every time you two open another door, I keep thinking this will be the time you find some gross, dripping thing with too many mouths. Let's call it a night and try again tomorrow, okay? I have no problem with that suggestion, said Wilma. Already? Said Dot. But what if the next door has something that answers all the questions? What if it's something with a tentacle where its head should be? Said Imogen. Okay, said Wilma. One more door. If it's an unspeakable horror, we slam the door and we run. If it answers even one question, we investigate. But it will probably be just another featureless corridor with empty rooms. So if it's that, we go back upstairs and try again tomorrow. Deal? Deal, said Imogen. Fine, deal, said Dot, sighing. All right, said Wilma. I think we've done all the doors on this level, so let's go one or two more turns. They went back to the spiral staircase and descended another story. They found another metal door, just like the last dozen they'd seen. Dot reached out and tried the handle. "Well, nuts," said Dot. "This one's locked. Hey, that's interesting, right? We haven't found a single locked door yet, have we?" Wait a minute," said Wilma. "I've seen a lock like this before." There was a large circle on the door with a pattern of small holes near the rim. The holes were ringed in blue. Wilma reached for her multi-tool and twisted the selector to the blue position. The pieces of the tool swung and pivoted, rearranging themselves into the key that fit the lock, just as they had done on Wilma's very first job in Crate. She twisted the large circle, and the door swung open. "Ooh," said Dot, "a new development. After you, Wilma." No, said Wilma. "A deal's a deal. Take a look." Beyond the door was, sure enough, yet another featureless corridor. "There you are," said Wilma. "No answers, no gibbering horrors, just another hallway. Let's go back upstairs." "Oh, thank goodness," said Imogen. "Oh, come on," said Dot. "We've found something new. Maybe there are doors that only your multi-tool can open, huh? We've got to check. We've got to be methodical, right?" "All right," said Wilma. "Sorry, Imogen, but we technically did learn something new. We learned that my multi-tool does more than fix pipes in town. There might be some more doors down here that are meant for me, or Uncle Amos at least, to open." She stifled a yawn. "Okay, Dot, let's go." "Awesome," said Dot. "Hey, look, the corridor opens up ahead. Maybe there's some kind of machinery or something, Dot ran ahead, but the cable went taut and yanked her back. "Ah, and there we go," said Wilma. "You can vote to press on all you want, but the cable has veto power. Time to go back." Dot turned back and headed for the stairs. "How much more cable can we get?" "I'm not sure, but I'll get all I can first thing tomorrow." "Sweet. We'd better make sure we can get back to this corridor." Dot took out a black permanent marker and drew a little X next to the spot where they reached their limit. Wilma climbed back up the staircase with Dot trudging behind her. They picked up armfuls of the tether as they went. When they reached the top of the stairs, they pulled the rest of the cable behind them, and Wilma closed the door. "Oh my gosh, it is so good to see you both," said Imogen. "Even seeing that place through the cameras gave me the creeps. I was imagining that the screens would go black and the cable would go slack at any minute. I think I've seen way too many horror movies." Wilma folded her phone pocket flat and stood next to Imogen with her arm around her shoulders. Imogen held her arm and squeezed it like a security blanket. "Well, can you think of anything that would make it less creepy?" asked Wilma. "Not right now," said Imogen. "Maybe in the morning once I've calmed down. That is, if I don't have nightmares." "Do you want to crash here tonight just to be on the safe side?" "Actually, I think I might have to anyway." Imogen started to sway a little. "I didn't realize how keyed up I was until you were safely out of there." She looked up at Wilma, and her eyes were fighting to stay open. "I'm not actually sure I could make it to the sidewalk without passing out. I'm so tired." "Go ahead," said Dot, standing in front of the screen. "You two go ahead and get tucked in. I'm going to hang out for a while and go over the footage. The path tracking data actually looks pretty cool, and the LiDAR, it confirmed what I saw down in that last area. There's something big down there." "Sure thing, Dot," said Wilma, as she guided Imogen towards the stairs. "Turn everything off when you're done." When Wilma opened her eyes, she and Imogen were lying on top of her covers. They'd managed to get their shoes off, but they were both otherwise fully clothed. Apparently, both of them had come down fast from the excitement of the previous evening. Imogen shifted a little and stretched out her arms. "Oh, good morning." "Good morning," said Wilma. "Any nightmares?" Imogen's fingers brushed Wilma's chin as she sleepily gave Wilma a peck on the cheek. "How could I have a bad dream with my brave girl so close by?" Wilma rolled her eyes and tapped the tip of Imogen's nose. "You're very cute, but you need your coffee." She checked her phone for the time, and it's surprisingly early. There's just enough time to get a couple cups before work. Just then, an alert appeared on Wilma's phone with a chime. It gave an address in town and a single word, housewarming. Not long after, the same chime came from Imogen's phone, somewhere among the sheets. "Never mind, spoke too soon," said Wilma. "Looks like I've got an early start today. Sounds like you do, too." Imogen shifted through the bedclothes for her phone and checked the alert. "Oh, it's not work. We're getting new arrivals in town. A whole bunch of people will be there to make sure the house is in good shape for when they get here." "Really?" said Wilma, taking a seat on the bed. "I don't remember you all running out to welcome me and Dot into town." "Well, I don't know about Dot," said Imogen, "but you weren't really brand new to town, were you? You came to take the place of your Uncle Amos, and your house was all ready and waiting for you to move in." She spread her arms and legs on the bed, making a snow angel in the covers. "When there are actually new people, we have to get the house ready for them so they'll fit in when they arrive." "Oh, yeah?" said Wilma. She kept her face deliberately neutral. "And how does everyone find out that new people are coming? I mean, who sends out the alerts?" The cheer fell away from Imogen's face. "I don't know. They just come. It's one of those questions I never thought to ask until you showed up." "And what about the house?" said Wilma. "Is this housewarming also a barn raising, or are there just a bunch of empty houses waiting for new people to move in?" Imogen sat up in the bed and huddled close to Wilma. "That's the other thing. Whenever people get an alert for a housewarming, we all show up to find a new house already there. No one builds them. They just show up." "Really?" said Wilma. "Out of nowhere?" "Empty grass one day, full-grown house the next." "And no one's ever wondered where they come from?" "I guess not," said Imogen. "It must be something about living here, you know? Things just happen, and people don't ask questions." "Maybe it's human nature," said Wilma. "No one thinks about how their plumbing works as long as fresh water comes in when they turn the handle." "Well, listen to you sounding like a plumber," said Imogen, smirking. "You'd think you go everywhere with a wrench at your hip." "The point is, no one thinks about things that work well," said Wilma. She turned her face to Imogen. "Just like no one thought about what happened to the garbage until we found metallic centipedes crawling around under our feet." Imogen started to get the spark in her eye again. "Are you talking about exploring again?" "Yeah," said Wilma. "Above ground this time. Until we know more, I mean. We did both get invited, so it'd be rude to say no." Imogen put her arm across Wilma's shoulders and lifted her legs across Wilma's lap. "Well, when you put it that way..." Wilma smiled. "Yeah, I thought so. Come on, let's get ready." Once Wilma and Imogen were both ready to face the day, they stepped out of Wilma's front door and walked, arm in arm, to the address of the new house. They met several other townspeople on the way, exchanging pleasantries about the impending get-together. From what everyone else was saying, they expected something like a taffy pull or a quilting bee, something to help the community knit together. Wilma and Imogen kept their own suspicions to themselves to avoid upsetting people. Everyone already knew that they had been searching around town for unusual items, but no one except Gus knew that they had found anything yet, and they wanted to keep it that way until they knew exactly what they had found. As they approached the address, they could hear muttering ahead. It didn't sound like the cheerful and carefree chatter of a friendly social gathering. It sounded more like a disgruntled mob in the phase just before they became an unruly mob. As soon as Wilma and Imogen got close enough to see the new house, they could see why. The front doorway had been built upside down and wasn't lined up with the front stoop. The rear patio tilted sideways at a crazy angle. A chimney sprouted from the side of the building like a cannon. Many exterior walls had sections of wallpaper where windows should have been. Instead of rising to a peak, the roof sloped into a gully. The whole thing looked as though an architect had been simultaneously blind, drunk, and possibly having a seizure. I assume this isn't normal, said Wilma. No, it definitely isn't, said Imogen. Well, you were looking for a mystery and you found one. Wilma, said a richly accented voice from near the house. Come over here, will you? I'd like a word. Wilma and Imogen followed the voice toward the orphan front stoop, where they found Portia Zerochi wearing her ever-present pinstripe smock covered with flecks of paint. Wilma remembered her handing out the agendas at our first council meeting. I wanted to get a view of all the angles of the house so I could add it to my mural, said Portia. But this is a pazzesco. This is madness. Why would this happen in this way? Do you know anything? Me? I don't know anything, said Wilma. I only learned just now that houses suddenly appear out of nowhere. Well, aren't you looking into things around town? Said Portia. You are Crate's own little agencia investigativa, yes? And have you found any clues? We've found a few things, yes, said Wilma, now unable to stop picturing herself, Dot, and Imogen with big coats and magnifying glasses. But they don't make a lot of sense yet, and we don't know if they're connected or if this place is just weird. The mangled house might help us put the pieces together, or it might just be another weird thing. There's no way to know until we look around. What's it like inside? Said Imogen. Is it as crazy as this? We don't know that yet, said Dr. Willa Nance, walking up in her leather biker jacket to join the impromptu meeting. The door doesn't open more than a few inches, and what little we can see inside looks to be full of crisscrossing beams and wiring. There's no way anyone would be able to move around in there, let alone live. We tried asking a Gas to send his Ferretto inside, said Portia. But he said he didn't want to risk it after what he did at your house the other day. Oh, said Wilma. He told you about that? Not really, said Willie. He just said that he saw something he didn't like, and it made him not want to send the ferret into this house. I mean, I know he's a terse sort of fellow, but that was a new facet. Oh, that reminds me, said Wilma. You're the town psychiatrist, right, Willie? That's right. Imogen told me that when a new house appears, it means that someone new is coming to town. That's right. I don't know what it means, though. You don't? Because when Dot and I first arrived and Wolfgang was towing our car into town, he seemed to get some kind of message that made him want to start chatting with us all of a sudden. And then later, when we were in Latimer's office dealing with Uncle Amos's bequest, he said things that made it sound like he knew what we were like already, that we would fit into the town. And also, when you and Dot first met, you said out loud that she lived up to her profile. Yeah, okay, said Willie. I guess now is as good a time as any to get into it. Part of my job is to screen people who are due to take up residence in Crate, to make sure that they won't bring undue attention to the town. Also, to make sure that there will be something for them to do when they get here. I receive a report on every new arrival as soon as they're on their way, and I evaluate it and put together a profile so that the town will be prepared. What do you mean, undue attention? What are you guys trying to hide here? Look, you must have noticed that living here isn't like living in other places, right? Said Willie. She wasn't getting angry. She was almost pleading. Crate is unlike any other place in the world. If too many people knew what sorts of things we have here, they would flock here just to see it. Maybe try to carve out a slice of it for themselves. We can't let them do that. Not when... Willie lowered her voice to a whisper and leaned in close. Not when we barely understand where it all comes from ourselves. And we can't just let anybody come live here. The town probably wouldn't survive. We simply don't know what would happen. All we can do is make sure that things keep happening the way they always have. You see, said Imogen, it isn't just me. So, the people of Crate weren't merely blissfully unaware of what went on under their feet. They just tried to avoid thinking about it, in case it went away. Maybe, as long as she did her best not to upset the apple cart, she could interest more people in taking a closer look at the apples. So you're the one who goes over the reports about new people, huh? Said Wilma. Do you know where the reports come from? No, said Willie. The same place the house comes from, probably. And the same place the garbage goes to, probably, said Wilma. So if a new house means new people, then what reports have you gotten lately? That's just it, said Willie. The last report I got was for you and Dot. There's been nothing since then. Wilma! Imogen! Said the unmistakable voice of Dot from somewhere in the growing crowd. Wilma and Imogen turned to see her bouncing through the crowd, still wearing her Stormtrooper Laura Croft exploring outfit. Following behind her was an unfamiliar woman covered head to toe in tattoos. She wore piercings in everything that was conceivably pierceable, and pattern-dyed hair she'd shaved and spiked. She wore one gold and one silver contact lens, and implants in her earlobes that stretched them out into fine points. She looked like an elf on her way to Burning Man. Dot, good morning, said Wilma. You remember Willie, right? And Portia, yes, it's good to see you both again, said Dot, waving excitedly to both of them. Wilma, this is Tina, the lady I told you about from the hardware store. It's a pleasure, said Tina, shaking Wilma's hand. Wilma spotted a small glowing patch on the inside of Tina's wrist, which looked like some kind of chip implant. Dot told me all about your little foray. I'm glad I could help. Hey, I appreciate any help I can get with all this weirdness, said Wilma. Looks like we've found some more, too. Yeah, no kidding, said Dot. Did someone sneeze out a house? Pfft. That's what I've been wondering, said Imogen. But no one can get inside. What, is the door locked? Said Dot. I haven't seen a locked door yet. Not here, anyway. Take a look for yourself, said Willie. Dot, Wilma, and Imogen walked across the front lawn to the upside-down front door, and Wilma reached up for the handle. The door opened, but it stopped short after less than a foot. Inside was a jungle of struts a cat could get lost in. Okay, said Wilma, this is a no-go. No way can we fit through that. Oh, I don't know, said Dot. I've been spending some time with a yoga instructor at the gym, and I might be able to find a way through. Really? Said Wilma. And what about the rest of us? If you get in trouble in there, we aren't going to be able to get in to rescue you. Well, there's got to be a back end to all this mess, said Dot. I'll try to find my way through to somewhere where I can stand up straight, and then I'll let you know what I find. You can follow my progress the whole way. What do you say? It's not like we don't have plenty of practice by now, said Imogen. At least we'll be able to get a look inside the house. All right, said Wilma. She turned to Willie and Portia. Anyone object to us getting a look around inside? By all means, if you can, said Portia. Just don't hurt yourself, said Willie. But barring that, I'm all for it. All right then, said Dot. She stepped back from the door and started limbering up, pulling each arm across her chest and then bending as far back as she could go. Wilma expected her to stop at horizontal, but she kept on bending until she could grab her own ankles from behind. Wow, said Wilma. That must be some yoga instructor. Yeah, she's really done wonders for my breathing, said Dot. She righted herself again and did some deep knee bends. Okay, I think I'm ready to go. Give me a boost, will you? Dot pulled her techno hood over her head and switched on the headgear. Wilma leaned against the wall of the house near the door and laced her fingers into a step, and Dot climbed up until she was level with a gap in the tangle big enough to stick her head through. She reached in and pulled herself forward until only her lower body was outside the door, and then her feet, and then she was out of sight. Wilma quickly took out her phone and searched for Dot's signal. Once she had the connection, She immediately began streaming the data to the rig at her house so she could analyze it later. For now, she just watched the feed from Dot's forward-facing camera, keeping her eyes peeled for any sign of habitable space. "Is there anything I should do to help?" said Imogen. "It's not making me feel any better for both of us to just sit here and watch." "Oh, sure. Yeah, you should head back to the house and get the cable," said Wilma. "If Dot finds a full-sized way in, I want to see where it leads as soon as possible." "You got it." Imogen raced back towards Wilma's house, while Wilma kept her eyes glued to the screen as Dot snaked her way along. The gathered crowd, especially Portia and Willie, remained concerned about the strange new house in their town, but since Wilma seemed to be on top of the matter, they started to grow restless now that they knew that the usual housewarming festivities were not on the schedule. Wilma kept in touch with Dot during her soiree, but the only information Dot relayed was that she hadn't gotten into trouble. Nothing was shifting in a way that it suggested it might collapse, and nothing was actually trying to hurt her. She was just sort of enjoying the challenge. Wilma couldn't even get a good idea of the house's interior from Dot's forward-facing camera. It all just looked out of order, like a pile of pickup sticks. When Imogen returned with the supplies, she pressed her way back to the center of the crowd, which had started to thin a little. "How's she doing?" "Still fine," said Wilma. "She's starting to get a little bored. I mean, this is Dot we're talking about." Wilma's phone crackled with sound. "Wilma, are you there?" "Yeah, Dot, I'm still here. Did you find anything?" "Yeah, I have some good news and some less good news. The good news is I think I found an open space where we can start exploring for real, along with a way to get you down here with me." "Down here?" said Wilma. "Are you under the house?" Let's see," said Imogen, pulling out her phone, which she had connected to the central rig at the house. She showed Wilma the display of Dot's path, which scrawled all over the interior of the house and ended up below street level. "Yeah, she's in the basement." "The bad news is I think I'm a little stuck. I could probably get out of here eventually, but it would be faster if you just came to help me out." "All right," said Wilma. "You point the way and I'll be right there." "All right, here goes." Dot looked as though she were feeling for something out of her camera's view, and then Wilma could hear a rumbling, both over Dot's feed and from somewhere around the house. "There. Yeah, I can see daylight shining into the room now. Look around for an opening." "I heard it, Dot. I'll be right there." Wilma and Imogen ran around the house toward the source of the sound, followed by Portia, Willie, and plenty of the other townsfolk. Behind the house, against the rear wall, was an open cellar door that had burst through the lawn. Wilma knelt down on the torn sod. Through the cracked earth, she could just see a basement which looked mostly unfinished, but also pretty ordinary. She also saw steps leading down. They were oddly shaped, but they held her weight. Once she was safely down, Imogen stopped biting her knuckles and followed her. Once Wilma had entered the basement, she immediately heard another noise, an insistent thumping from near the door. She turned to see a switch on the wall next to some kind of duct. A white-clad hand reached out from the side of the duct toward the switch, and two white-clad legs hung down from the bottom, idly kicking the wall. Wilma wiped the dust away from a window on the front of the duct to see Dot, happily waving at her from inside. She was facing forward, but her feet were facing the wall. Wilma shrugged and opened a latch on the front of the duct, and Dot popped out, taking a deep breath and realigning herself. "Thanks," said Dot. "Another 5 or 10 minutes and that would have started to get really uncomfortable." "I say it again, that must be some yoga instructor," said Wilma. "So you said there was something worth exploring down here?" "Yeah, right over here," said Dot, rounding a corner in the basement. "I got a peek at it when I was rummaging around, and it made me realize that this was where I needed to get to." She pointed to a heavy metal door, which looked a lot like the basement door in Wilma's house, but with much more artistic detail. "There it is." "Okay," said Wilma. She set her phone in its pocket on the front of her shoulder. Imogen, let's get the rope tied off and set up, shall we? Sure, but I don't think we should try to tie it to anything in here, said Imogen. I still don't know if this place has any load-bearing members. I'll tie it to a tree outside. I'll go with you, said Dot. I could use some fresh air. The three climbed back out of the cellar, where they found the party was back in full swing. Tina was setting up a rolling TV, and Portia and Willie were ready to observe, along with Latimer and a few other council members. Wow, Tina, that was fast, said Wilma. You just happened to have one of those handy? No, I had to run back to my shop real quick to grab one, said Tina. This should be better than your phones for coordinating your expedition. I think we'd all like to see what you kids have been getting up to lately, said Willie. I know I would. And I will be taking notes as well, said Portia. If you find a labyrinth beneath the city, you will need a map maker to help you solve it. So this is an official council matter now, said Wilma. If it is, said Willie Nods, then we should be here to say so, right? I guess so, said Wilma. She tugged on the cable after Imogen had finished fastening it to the tree. Dot, shall we? We shall. Dot positively skipped down into the basement on the end of the cable, and Wilma followed after her. Behind the metal door was another starkly lit staircase that began to curve into a spiral. More doors branched off from the spiral staircase at regular intervals, just like beneath Wilma's house. This time, though, when they opened the first door, they found a corridor that actually looked like it was made for people. Lights were regularly spaced along its length, keeping the entire space well lit. The corridor made a right angle, not more than 30 feet away, rather than continuing off into an eye-watering distance. In fact, it wasn't long at all before they found a door that looked promising. It even had some kind of sign on it, at eye level, although it didn't have anything written on it resembling letters or numbers. Dot grabbed the handle and pulled, but the door didn't budge. Nuts, said Dot. And it looked so good, too. I don't suppose you've got a secret tool for this one, too, do you? Wilma's voice, when it came, was only a whisper, because it took all her willpower to keep it from being a scream. I think I do have a tool for this. She pointed a trembling finger at an oddly shaped socket next to the door handle. It was a collection of holes, slots, and angles that Dot didn't recognize, but Wilma recognized it right away. I don't get it, said Dot. What is this? Stay right here, said Wilma in the same rock-steady tone. I'll be right back. Wilma ran back the way they had come, her harness clip following the cable to the surface where Imogen was waiting for news. The rest of the crowd was studying the door on the screen, looking for whatever it was that Wilma had spotted. What is it? Said Imogen. What did you find? Wilma unclipped herself from the cable and planted a big kiss on Imogen's forehead. I don't know yet. Keep an eye on Dot. I'll be right back. Wait for me. The last part was shouted over her shoulder because she was already running. Wilma ran as fast as she could back to her house, her hands shaking so much from the adrenaline that she almost couldn't get her key into the vault. But once it was open and the object she needed was in her hand, she got her key back as fast as she could and started sprinting. She didn't even wait for the vault to close all the way. Back at the party, everyone was still huddled around the screen, the image swinging back and forth as Dot killed time at the door. Wilma clipped herself into the cable again, and then she wrapped part of her harness around Imogen and clipped it to herself as well. What? Said Imogen. What did you find? Something that you'll want to see up close, said Wilma. Hold tight and come with me. It isn't far. With the way Imogen was strapped to Wilma's harness, they were practically in each other's arms already, but Imogen clung to Wilma anyway. She relaxed a little when they reached the corridor where Dot waited for them. All right, said Imogen. Here we are. So, what is it? Said Dot. What did you see? Well, you see that socket? Said Wilma, pointing to the holes next to the door. Yeah, said Dot. Now, look at this, said Wilma. She pulled from her pocket the object she'd retrieved from the vault. "Oh yeah," said Dot. "The weird vacuum tube dial thing." "Look at the end," said Wilma. She held it under the light from Dot's hood. The prongs and contacts on the bottom of the tube matched the socket perfectly. Imogen patted Wilma's arm excitedly. All three of them started to grin. Wilma inserted the tube into the socket, and the sign on the door immediately split into small jointed plates, which flipped and twisted until they finally came to rest in a different configuration. "Is that writing?" said Dot. "I've never seen anything like that," said Wilma. "What about this?" said Imogen, reaching for the vacuum tube and tentatively giving the dial on the end a twist. The dial turned with a click, and the shapes rearranged themselves again. The sign looked different, but still illegible. She turned the dial one more click, and the symbols changed again. "Holy crap," said Wilma. "That's Arabic script." "I think this thing is letting us choose a language," said Imogen. "Do you read Arabic?" asked Dot. "No, I do not," said Wilma. "Let's see what other choices there are." Imogen clicked the dial again, and the sign turned from Arabic to a series of stylized faces, to a variant of Japanese, and finally to English. "Network access," read the little sign. "Whoa," said Dot. "What does that mean?" said Imogen. Wilma gently lifted Imogen's hand away from the vacuum tube, took it in her own, and twisted. Something rang behind the wall, and the door slowly swung open with barely a sound. The trio slowly stepped into the room, its walls lit by Dot's hood, Wilma's phone, and hundreds of tiny green lights scattered all around like a technological galaxy. As they stepped across the threshold, a soft glow gradually filled the room from sconces all around the tops of the walls. Cabinets rose from the floor and unfolded from panels in the walls, revealing screens filled with abstract streams of data and keyboards labeled with unknown commands. "Okay," said Dot. "I know I really shouldn't touch anything in here, but I also really want to." Imogen and Wilma stepped over to one of the keyboards. Imogen turned her back to Wilma and took a closer look. "Wait a minute," said Imogen. "I've seen this before." She pressed a few keys, and the largest screen on the wall changed from a string of characters to a picture. "Nice," said Wilma. "It's a map of the city. What are those lines? Electrical cables?" "No," said Imogen. "It's data flow. This is a map of the Crate wireless network. And look at this." She typed another command. The map of Crate shrank until the whole of the country was visible. Lines of data flowed between the major population centers and across the oceans to other countries. Every single cluster of data flowed into this one spot. "The entire world's information network flows through Crate," said Wilma. "Yeah," said Imogen. "In fact, I suspect it flows through this very room, every single bit of it. We could learn anything we want to just from typing out commands in here," said Dot. "No," said Wilma. She stepped to the door and looked down the hallway. "Not quite everything." All right, listeners, that is tonight's story. Once again, you heard Housewarming, the news from Crate number 5 by Nathaniel Hicklin. If you liked tonight's story, I encourage you to share it on social media. Chances are your friends will love it too. Also, if you would like to support this podcast, head on over to patreon.com/Semper Serpent. For $1 a month, you can get full access to the written archive of stories. And for $3 a month, you can get early access to new episodes of this podcast weeks before anyone else. The text and audio for tonight's story was produced by me, Michael Strand, managing editor at Semper Serpent. The author of tonight's story was Nathaniel Hicklin, Semper Serpent writer, and the publisher of tonight's episode was T. Martin Krause, editor-in-chief at Semper Serpent. And finally, the music for this run of stories is from Lackey Inspired. Find more of his work at soundcloud.com/LackeyInspired. Thank you so very much for listening. And if you have been, thank you for subscribing and supporting us. We truly do appreciate it. We will see you next time on the Everlasting Stories podcast.